Hey everyone, welcome back to Videv and to this episode 4 of LINQ In-Depth Series. I'm Munir Hussain, a senior software engineer and an architect with over a decade of experience working on .NET platform and a part-time instructor at Videv. In this episode, we are going to dive deep into select statement in LINQ. Let us see what we will cover in this episode. We will inspect and make use of select extension method in LINQ. We will be checking out all the flavors of or the overloads of select method. We will craft our own select extension method in order to better understand the functionality of this function. We will understand what yield statement in C# is. We will see what are the different ways of calling this extension method. By the end of this episode, you will have a solid understanding of select extension method in LINQ. Let us go to Visual Studio and make this happen. Okay guys, we are back in Visual Studio and we are in the same solution we left with in the previous episode 3 of this LINQ In-Depth series. Now I have made some changes in the solution to have a better LINQ learning experience. Let's go to Solution Explorer and explore these changes so that we can make use of these changes while we learn LINQ. So first off, let's explore what type of data we will be working with. So in this series, we will be working with the CSV file. Although linked objects have nothing to do with the CSV file, but to recheck the outputs, we need it so that we can quickly inspect what we are doing and what our expected results are and compare the results with the output. So we will be working with this output.csv in the data folder of this solution. So let's quickly open this and inspect what's inside. So we have the header of customer ID, first name, last name, email, and blah, blah, blah. And then this is the data of the CSV file. Now, if you are glaring on this CSV file, don't be scared. We will be mapping this file into linked objects, and then we will be making use of those objects in memory to learn LINQ. I have already crafted some functionality for your disposal to read this CSV file. Let's go to csv.cs file, and here I have made a class called CSV, and then this is the read function which will read this CSV file for us. And what's inside this read function is not the topic right now. All you have to know right now is that this read function will give us the objects in memory and IEnumerable of customer back. And let's go to customer.cs file, and this contains customer class with some property over here. This is the same class we left with in the previous episode. So that's all we need to know about this class. There are some other functions over here. You can inspect it in my GitHub repository. We are not going to discuss further. So next functionality which I have written is I have extended IEnumerable of p and made a display function which will print the collection of objects out to the console in a nicely written table format. So that's all I have made right now. So let's go back to main function of this program class, and then we will inspect what LINQ provides us. Let me quickly test the functionality for you. Let's make the object of a CSV class where CSV is equal to new CSV, and then let's read the CSV file csv.read and see what's returning. It's returning IEnumerable of customer. So let's quickly make a variable list and assign it to the list. Fine. And then let's display some of the properties over here. Display text such that new. What we want to display? We want to display the first name, right? Okay, fine. We want to display the last name. So let's quickly test it. See, we get the customer first name and the last name in the nice format, right? In the format we like, right? So just in case you are curious about this display function, this will be available on my GitHub repository. So make use of this display function if you need it. Now enough setup. Let's go back to our business. In this episode, as you know, we will be learning the select function, the select extension, LINQ extension function. So let's quickly make use of this. The select function projects or selects some of the properties of the objects in a list. So let us see what I mean by that. What we can do is list.select and then x such that x dot say first name. So what it will do is it will just select the first name out of every object of this list. Fine. Now what is it returning? It's returning IEnumerable of string. Fine. So let's make a variable. So let's name it first names, right? So the way we can understand this select function right now in its simplest form is to assume that this is a list, fine. We are getting this list from this read function, right? And then this list can be any form of collection, right? We are not concerned about what this list is all about. All we know it is that it's some list which is inheriting from I enumerable of customer, right? And then assume that this select loops through this list and give us back the customer one by one into this X parameter, right? And then we are just projecting or selecting this first name, which is string. And this first name, it will extract the first name from every element of the list of customers or the collection of customers and give us back those first names into this variable first names, right? Now let's quickly display the list out to the console. So we just have to do first names dot display X such that new X dot first name, right? So that we can get the nicely outputted first name out to the console. See, we get only the first names out of this list, right? Now, if you want to project or select other properties of the list, we can project like this, last name, and another property like salary, and then we can display them as well, right? So let's run the project. See, we have the first name, last name, and the salary and the data. So let's inspect the signature of this select function so that we can have a better understanding what it offers, so that we can make use of it in a better way. So let's go to definition and inspect its signature. So what it returns I enumerable of T result. What is this T result? T result is this anonymous object and with the properties first name, last name, and salary, right? And then inspecting further, this is the name of the function, the select, and which operates on two generic parameters, T source and T result. In T source, in our case, is the type of the list. And what is the type of our list? That is the customer. And this T result, what is the type of this T result? In our case, it's anonymous object. And this is extending I enumerable of T source, which in our case, since we are operating on the list, so that list inherits from I enumerable of T or T source also, that effectively means the list will also operate on this select function, right? So moving on further, so the second parameter is this func. So what is the func? Func is the delegate which accepts the pointer to a function in the type safe manner, right? So this function will accept the pointer to a function whose formal parameter is T of type T source and which returns a type T result. So what is this T source? This T source in our case will be customer. What is this T result? In our case, it will be an anonymous object as shown. So let's go back to our program.cs and make some change to understand the signature of this select function. So let's go back to definition and see this func. So it accepts the address of the function, but we are something returning over here X such that X go to this thing. So to understand this thing, let's cut it out and put a function name over here so that we can actually pass the pointer in its lowest form. So let's name this as partial customer and control dot and generate the method, right? So that we can comply with this signature of this func, right? We don't need this. What we can do here is let's make a tuple over here. Let us copy this thing and paste it here. And this will be of type string. So this will be of type again string, and this will be of type decimal, right? And let's name it as C is equal to, let's copy this again and paste it here and rename this customer, right? And return this thing and return C, right? So if you are not familiar with the tuples, it's nothing, but it's a nice way of returning the object back to the caller. So .NET Framework will make a class out of these definitions and assign the values we provide. And when we return that object, it will return the object back to the caller. So nothing fancy. So since we are returning the tuple, the same thing goes here. So this is the return type of this function, right? So nothing fancy over here. Now let's put a breakpoint over here. So let us see whether we have complied with this func thing. So what it is saying, it's saying it should return a T source and a t result. In our case, it should be customer. So the formal parameter of this function should be customer. So we are complying with that. What is the second requirement? The second requirement is it should be of t result. In our case, it can be of any type, anonymous type or our own type, whatever we like, fine? So we are returning a tuple here, fine? And also make note of this partial customer. So we are passing the name of the function which returns, or which effectively means we are passing the pointer to a function, which is this function, to this select extension function over here, this func, right? For a moment, let us suppose this select is a member of this list class, so list of customer. So in that sense, the data of the list or any member of this list will be available to this select by default. We don't have to pass it. So same is the case with the extension method. The way we pass the data or this list to the select extension method is that this list will be passed to this parameter, the first parameter by default. We don't have to pass it along. So make note of this, that this list will be passed along to this source in order for this select to behave as if it is the member of the list class or any collection. Let's talk more about this partial customer function. As you know, we are passing the pointer to this partial customer function to the extension method, the select, and this select will, since it has the address of this function, it will just loop through this collection and pass the customer elements one by one, calling this function the partial customer function. And in the body of this function, we are just selecting what we want to select from this customer one by one, and returning this tuple or the data back to select. And this select will just pass along this data back to us, and that will be stored in first name variable. So let's quickly check it. Let's run the application and see the behavior. See, it's calling it, and we are getting one of the customers. So let's continue, and then we are getting another customer, right? Let's continue, and we are getting another customer, fine? So that in effect means it's calling this function again and again, and we are selecting the data and what we want. And if we see the output, so let's get rid of this breakpoint and hit continue and see what is the data. See, we are getting the same data we were getting previously, fine? This is one of the ways by which we pass the data along and the function pointer to this select extension method, but other ways are also possible. So let's go back to this function. So it's an obvious thing, we will not be writing the functions again and again for selecting our data. So that will not be a desirable thing. Every time we have to think a new name. Number one. Number two, this is a long functionality. We just have to return output of the single line of the code. So let us see what is the other way we can do the same thing. Let us copy the parameter of this function along with the body and copy it and paste it inside as the parameter of this select and append delegate. That's it, we are done. So what this effectively means, this is the body of the function, and then we are specifying that please make a pointer of this function body, this function we just wrote, and pass it along to the select function along with the data of the list, right? So let's quickly test it. So we are getting the same data. We were getting John Wilson and blah 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 over here. So we are getting the same data, right? So what is the other possibility? So other possibility is LambdaExpression. So we need to get rid of this delegate and put this sign, which means goes into or such that, whatever you like, you can pronounce it, then the body of this function, right? So since we have a single parameter, if we have multiple parameters, we have to specify the parenthesis. Since we have a single parameter, we can get rid of these parentheses also, and this customer also. Let us name this as C and return this and get rid of this body altogether and specify anonymous object. Or I think we can return the tuple as well. So since I have written here C, so let's specify C dot, and we are done, right? So as you can yourself judge that returning a tuple from the select specifies our solution also, right? This single line of code is known as lambda or lambda expression or lambda function. So clearly this is a nice, beautiful and a clear syntax for our disposal, right? So let's run the thing and we should be getting the same output, right? So here you can either specify the tuple, fine, or you can make use of anonymous object like this, curly braces, and specify new over here. So it will give us the same output. So choice is yours. See, we are getting the same output, right? Now this select extension method has got one more overload. Let's quickly inspect that as well. So the only place it differs is the way it accepts the func delegate. Now this func accept the pointer to a function use a formal parameters or t source, which is customer in our case, and a parameter of type int. So what is this parameter? This parameter will be the index of the current object passed along to our lambda function. So to understand it better, here we can make some change and understand how we can make use of it. So under the parenthesis, now we are accepting the object of type customer and index I, fine, of this customer in the list. Now let us suppose we have a business requirement that every customer object in the customer list should have its own serial number. But as you know, we are mapping or fetching the customer object from the CSV file, and the CSV file does not have any serial number, right? Now what to do? We can make use of this index and generate the serial numbers on the fly, right? So let's do that. Serial number is equal to I plus 1, right? And then we can also have this serial number to be displayed out to the console, right? X dot serial number, right? And we are done. So let's run the project and see. See, we have the serial number over here. So this is the unique identifier for the business purpose only. As a technical person, we have no use of it. We use IDs of the object whenever we need to process the data, right? But you may also argue that why don't we have ID as the serial number? So it is the nature of the data source that the IDs are not sequential by default. So it can have missing numbers. We can have the first row or the object with the ID 1 and the second row or the object with ID 5. That can happen. We can't rely on those IDs for serial number for this reason, fine? So now comes the fun part. Let's implement this select function ourselves so that we can have a better understanding what this select function is all about and how it is able to return this anonymous object back to us. Before we do that, let's do one thing, customize or simplify this select functionality so that we have a simplified version of this select. And let's format a bit, and we don't need this index anymore. And also comment out this display. And for simplicity's sake, let's say we don't want these properties, to save some typing here. And what we want to display? We want to display console.writeLine f.firstname, right? So we are looping through the list and displaying the first name only. Let's quickly run this just in case we make sure we don't break anything. So we are getting the names back. So why we are manually doing this and not making use of this display function, this will make the things clear to you what we are doing. Now let's go to definition of this select function and copy the signature of this select extension method and paste it in the LINQ extension class we made in episode 2 of this LINQ In-Depth series. So all we have to do here is for each item in the source, yield returns selector item. So what this means is we are getting the address or the function pointer in this select parameter. So what this means is we are getting the address of this lambda or the lambda function passed along to this selector variable, and this source is passed by default, and this source is a list of customers, I enumerable of customers, right? And then we are looping through this I enumerable of customers, which is source, and then we are calling this function, which effectively is the function pointer. In effect, we are calling this lambda, right? Then when we call it, we just provide an item to the lambda in this t parameter, and then we are returning whatever is selected by the user of this select extension method, right? So if you are layering on this yield statement is nothing but it's returning the enumerator only once. No matter how many times you loop through this source, this yield return select item will return the enumerator only once, then instance of the enumerator only once. And then just when we make use of the for each loop over here, the for each loop will make use of that enumerator and just call the monext function of the enumerator and print the things or the first name over here. So if you don't understand the language over here, please watch my episode 3 of this LINQ In-Depth series so that you can better understand what I mean by this. So effectively, what I mean is unless and until this first name encounters a for each loop, nothing will happen. So this for each loop, or there is another method by which it can trigger the functionality is some other way by which internally the for each loop is triggered. What is the other way? We will see in the next episodes of this LINQ In-Depth series. So in this episode, we are just concentrating on this select function. So let's go to LINQ extension class back and copy the functionality and make another overload of this select. So what we need to do is just pass along the index also. For that to happen, we need to declare variable. Let's name it as index and initialize it to 0. Fine. And then we have to pass it along as index and increment the index. Fine. So effectively, we are passing along the index of the item here to the lambda, right? To the lambda here. So that's all about it. We have successfully made our own extension method select, that too with both the overloads. Fine. Now this functionality is a little bit not so performant, so we will make this performant in next coming episode. So at this point, it's enough for you to understand the functionality of these extension methods so that you can query and LINQ in a better way. So let's quickly do one thing. Let us put a breakpoint here and let us put a breakpoint here. Let's put a breakpoint here and not here. It's another overload. So run the application. So as you can see, unless and until we are not in the for each loop here, we are not hit by the breakpoint. That effectively means this is something we call it as lazy loading. Fine. So here we are just returning the enumerator. Here we are making use of the monext function of that enumerator so that we can enumerate the elements of the first names here. So here, see, we are looping through it and getting the data back. Right? This should be enough evidence that unless and until the for each loop is hit, nothing will happen here. Right? Now let's quickly test the function, the other custom implementation of this select extension method we made. So let's first do one thing. Let's get rid of this thing and switch the display and uncomment the previous functionality and put a breakpoint in the other overload of this functionality. So let's run the application. Again, we are hit by the breakpoint since we are making use of this display function. So let's continue and see we get the data or not. Till now, we are not getting any data. Let's get rid of this breakpoint and see the data, right? So see, we have the data, right? So for the completeness of this episode, so I just need to point out here, there is another way by which we can select or project this list. This is by calling this LINQ extension class directly, since it is a static class as well, right? So let's see how we can do this. Do one thing, comment this out and switch the gears back to this. And what we can do, LINQ extensions dot select, and then we have to pass the list along, right? We just have to get rid of this, and let's run the application, see, and let us see we get the same data. See, we are getting the same data, the first name, right? So in some scenarios, calling the extension method directly by this static class proves to be much more performant. So I thought, just in case you need to optimize your code, you should know how to call the LINQ extension methods directly by the static class, right? So guys, this is all about the select extension method. If you really like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any suggestions or feedback or questions, let me know in the comment section. See you in the next episode. Thank you. Have a great day.